Hey, Mitch. Mitch.
Stupid video games. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hey, I thought we could talk about Tron, but I wouldn't be dissing that video game if I was you.
Ed, these games suck. They're nothing like they were when we were little. Yeah,
No,
let's go
no,
talk about what?
I wouldn't say. Look, how about I do this? I'll go get a real classic video game. I'll be back in a second. Hold on.
All right, Tron, MCP. This thing's a
Want
stupid.
games? I'll give you games.
Hey, Mitch, I got it. It's right here. It's my Mitch. Mitch. Oh no! End of line. Hi, this is Ed Dollister.
And this is Mitch Halleck.
And welcome to another episode of Mitch and Ed's Excellent Adventure. Thanks for joining us. If it's the first time, welcome. If it's not, great to have you back. We've got some great past episodes as well if you're new to the show. And maybe you'd like to subscribe. How could you do that, Mitch?
Oh, Ed, it is easy as putting a quarter in an old video game machine. All you do is press that button like you're on an old Space Invaders, and you could subscribe. Boom, just like that. And know every time Ed and I go on another excellent adventure. Plus, don't forget to like us. And like Ed said, we have a bunch of old shows. If you want to go back and look, simply go through our page and you'll see shows about $6 Million Man, Land of the Lost, superheroes, you name it, we got it.
That's right. And if there's a topic that you go, oh, they haven't covered that, and you think we'd be good at, covering it, please write a comment below and let us know. And odds are we'll do it. Like the King Kong episode, we've had some great suggestions so far. So we really appreciate it. But today we're heading back to the year 1982, right at the, I suppose, almost the peak of the video game boom, at least the arcade video game boom. And we're talking about the cult classic Tron. Now, did you see Tron in the cinemas at all?
I did not, Ed, because you got to remember 1982, that was one heck of a summer for movies. I went back and looked, and it wasn't, I was still in high school, so I didn't have disposable cash like I do nowadays. So you had to pick and choose what movie you went to see. And it was a summer that was like no other. We had, ready for this one?
Yeah.
Star Trek 2. We call it the Road Warrior here, Mad Max 2.
Yeah, that's right.
Blade Runner came out, though not a big hit, but it was still out there. Tron was in there too, but there was another small movie called E.T. You might have heard of that. And that dominated the box office here in the States and honestly squeezed out a lot of competition because they were showing E.T. It wasn't like nowadays where they have like 50 theaters in one big building. There was only like one or two shows. So what they would do is they would just bump a movie out and put E.T. in there so they can get more showings in because that was selling out left and right. And poor Tron, honestly, just got squeezed out that summer here anyway. I don't know. How are things down there?
Well, I mean, again, it was, as you said, it was a big year. There was also Poltergeist, I think, was 82. The Thing
Gremlins.
And Gremlins was 84. There was a lot of blockbuster movies. And I remember my mum went with me to see Tron at the Village Twin. It was back then because there was only two cinemas.
There's only two shows. Yeah.
And I remember seeing it and sort of going, wow, that was pretty cool. I've never seen anything like it before. And my mum came out going, I think I've got a headache from all the color. It was a little bit, so it wasn't her cup of tea, but I really enjoyed it. It actually didn't, for a film that, sort of was riding that arcade wave, you had Pac-Man, that was early 80s, 81, 82. There was the Buckner Garcia hit song, Pac-Man Fever.
Pac-Man Fever,
There was the quarter shortage in the United States.
That's right, from all the video games,
So, and even before that in the late 70s with Tato's, Space Invaders. So it was huge. So you would think that it would be a bit of a no-brainer doing a video game movie, but I suppose like a lot of aspects of this film, it was ahead of its time. The audience just didn't cotton on. I suppose, you know, computers as well were pretty still new to the average, you know, Joe, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. It was one of those things where video games were everywhere. I mean, I was reading magazines. I had Video Game Monthly, Gamer Magazine. There was even one by Marvel Comics called Blip Magazine, which I think is kind of funny now because the blip refers to something else
Yes.
entirely different. But video games were everywhere. I had my Atari 2600, and I did have that sorry excuse of the at-home version of Pac-Man, which was nothing like the arcade version at all. It was really a letdown. But you're right. When I just said ET, you got to think about what's about to happen. ET is like that storm coming on the horizon. The movie is going to inspire Atari to go make a video game based on it. It was one of the worst games in the history of home video games. In fact, it basically collapsed the home video game market for quite some time. So 82 was the peak of video games, I really think. I mean,
That
like
was
you said,
yeah, for
Asteroid
sure.
Cooler,
Certainly, before the second wave of the home consoles came out with the
right.
NES,
That was in the
Nintendo.
later 80s.
That
Yeah,
was
that's when
that was a year or so
Nintendo.
later. But
Yeah,
interesting fact, and I'm pretty sure we'll do an ET episode. I think we'll do an ET episode since I've got an ET costume somewhere
you
here.
do have an
I
ET cut. You've
I
got the
do.
finger.
Sorry, I do. I've got.
I
I've,
know. Let's
anyway,
that's
let's.
for our adults only show. But go on.
That's for Mitch and Ed after dark. But basically, no. Basically, what it's just us with the lights out. Anyway, it's not that exciting. So, the ET video game actually did sell over 1 million copies. It did really well. But what happened was that they actually shipped like to stores like 3 million copies, and
Yeah.
that's why it you know,
The
so
glut.
by
Yeah.
normal standards it actually did really well. But anyway, I digress. You know, video games
No,
were
there's
the
actually,
hip
and
happening
we
thing.
are there's a landfill
Yes,
here in the
yes,
States, and somebody did it, like an archaeologist
yeah.
went and found it, and they dug down, and sure enough, they found boxes and boxes of destroyed ET games. But
Isn't
again,
that the that's the script for Indy 5? Mads Mikkelsen
it is.
runs.
I know. We just got
Mads
it out
Mikkelsen
now.
runs the dump.
We're
To,
gonna we're gonna get a letter right now from Disney. Sorry, Lucasfilm, we couldn't help it. But yeah, no, that's a story for another time about
It
ET. But going back to Tron, like you said, you would think it's a gonna be. I'm sounding like Mario from
Yeah,
Donkey Kong.
it's
It's gonna be a home run. It was not a home run. And again, it's not the fault of the movie so much. Like I said, it was just the landscape. It just got squished out of it. And honestly, like you said, your mom might have been a little headache. It was very, very ahead of its time because before that, CGI was just something you never heard of, computer graphic imagery. It never existed in film. Maybe a little bit here and there, like a little tweak, but nothing to the extent for a 90-minute movie like Tron was. So it
no,
was
absolutely. They had a little bit in I think in 2001. You know, just on on computer screens. In Star Wars, they had a little with the targeting computer and also with the display on Yavin 4. But this
but
is really
it was very basic, wireframe type of stuff. It wasn't like, oh wow, let's go watch that for 90 minutes.
So basically, the director Steve Lisberger, he was a graphic designer, and he got inspired by Pong, the video game, and some concept art, and thought, oh, I wonder what it would be good like to be we could create a movie, basically, set in the computer world. So basically, they pitched it. Disney picked it up. He got some interesting people to work with him. We've got, along with Steve Lisberger's vision, there's the French artist Mobius, who's a comic book artist who came up with all the costume designs. And of course, Sid Mead, the futurist or neo-futurist, who created all the vehicles. And he'd be familiar to the viewers of our show and any practically movie because of his work on Blade Runner, Alien as well, and numerous other
Sid
things.
Mead was, and not only that, like you said, they have this futuristic thing, and the Mobius thing is really obvious. There's a scene where I can't remember the older fella's name, where he's sitting in like a Grand Vizir type of position. He's got this big head. It's straight out of a Mobius comic book. The whole look of it all. But Sid Mead, like you said, he is very well known for his very clean, you know, fine lines, sharp angles, 90 degrees, all that stuff. When you see it in Blade Runner, it's kind of dirtied up, so you don't really appreciate it as much because it's trying to show like a world that's lived in. But when you see it in Tron, it looks like it came right off his drafting table because it is perfect. It is like
Yes.
every single crisp, clean line possible. So yeah, you can't help if you know Sid Mead's work. As soon as you see this movie, you go, "Oh, that's Sid Mead design." But one of the things you have to talk about too, because it is a Disney movie, they have Harrison Ellenshaw. Now, Harrison Ellenshaw is part of a legacy of special effects folks
Yes.
from Disney. His dad, Peter Ellenshaw, made what we all call the matte paintings. Nowadays, people don't know what we're talking about, but as kids, we knew what matte paintings
yeah.
were. Basically, it's a piece of glass where they would paint elaborate landscapes, and they would just leave a little section empty, and they would project the live action film that they shot through the glass, and then they'd composite that onto another piece of film so it looks like Indiana Jones is walking in a massive jungle in the Temple of Doom,
Yeah.
or Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi's shutting
Yes.
off the powered tractor beam.
On the
And he's in this big chasm. So they brought him in, and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, it's a CGI film. Why is a traditional painter being used in this movie? There's scenes with the real actors, and there's also in the computer world too. Like nowadays we take it for granted, but back then it was kind of out there. Bruce Boxleitner, who plays Tron, and also the human character too, he walks into the office.
Yes.
And there's a whole room of cubicles,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like workspaces. It goes on. It looks like for miles. It looks like the warehouse in Empire or Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Yes.
which is also a matte painting as well.
Yeah.
So probably by Ellenshaw.
Yeah,
Now
I think so.
So there's that scene because I watched the making of it, and Boxleitner only walks into a small area with maybe like one or two cubicles. But when you see it in the final film, there's hundreds of them that go on in the distance. So there was that traditional Disney, and one would think Disney's cutting edge. I mean, we're talking Walt Disney Studios, the people that made Fantasia and, you know, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, all those great effects films, that they would embrace this technology. Actually, it was the other way around. When Steve shows up to the studio to go ahead and make this movie, basically all the traditional Disney animators, the hand-drawn folks, kind of boycotted it and said they would work on the movie, but when push came to shove and actually start production, they walked away. They didn't work on it. They went to go work on other Disney projects that were going on.
Well, I think they were worried, you know, like the old story, computers are going to take my job, you know, sort of thing. But back then, the computers were nowhere near as powerful as practically today's pocket calculators. I know that the computers they were working with had only I was just saying to you earlier, I just bought a laptop with 16 gig memory. These computers that they were working on had 2 meg of RAM, and they had a hard drive of 330 meg. So
this calculator has more memory and stuff than those computers that they made Tron with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think before we even get to the you know, the visual effects, which is or the visual design aspect, we spoke about Bruce Boxleitner, who played Alan and Tron. I don't think he's aged a bit.
Oh God, no! I see him at conventions. In fact, I was trying to get him for my show a couple years ago when I had J. Michael Straczynski.
Yes.
Joseph
for Babylon 5.
Babylon 5. Yeah, and that's where I really watched Bruce Boxleitner. But you and I know him as being Indiana Jones fans. He was Frank Buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Bring Him Back Alive. But he was on Scarecrow, Mrs. King for many years with Kate Jackson. He was a lot of Westerns, like I think Lonesome Dove and I Married Wyatt Earp or Mrs. Wyatt Earp. He was always a Western type character, like a Gary Cooper. So it was a very odd choice for him to be the star of this science fiction, you know, space.
Yeah, because I suppose even back then, you know, you were associating computers to a culture, you know, a bit of a nerdy culture. It probably wasn't called nerds back then, but you know, those, when you think about, if you look at the photos, those long-haired, sort of, you know, bearded, sort of creating their computers in their garage. He starred opposite Jeff, who is fantastic as Kevin Flynn, who runs, you know, Flynn's video game arcade. I think I always wanted to have a bachelor pad like that. Video game place, living above a video game arcade. How cool would that be?
We haven't gone too far from that, so
Well, that's
take it
true.
easy.
So
Yeah,
Jeff Bridges sort of fits that, he's sort of a bit, not that hippie-esque, but that sort of counterculture sort of programmer who's sort of ousted from Encom. And you find out that basically Ed Dillinger, which always reminded me is Ed Dollister, it sounded a little bit like it, played by David Warner.
Don Dillinger, the gangster here.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But played by David Warner, who's he's a fantastic actor who's always the villain in Time Bandits, and he's been
Time After Time.
Yes, that's right. Star Trek. Which Star Trek was he?
He was a Klingon in Star Trek V, the
Undiscovered Country,
the Final Frontier.
Yes,
Final Frontier. Yes,
he's appeared in a lot.
No, I'm sorry. No, we're wrong.
What?
He is in number 6. He plays Gowron. Or Gorgon, the Klingon ambassador who tries to unite the Federation. He's the president of the Klingons and gets assassinated.
Yes.
That's who he is. I'm thinking David Warner was something else.
That's okay.
Well, wait a minute now.
Hang on.
Maybe he was in Star Trek 5 too.
Everyone was in Star Trek 5.
I think David Warner. No, I think he was the Federation ambassador.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think Warner was.
That's an episode we'll have to do. I think
we'll do the career of David Warner, because he is something else, like you said. And as Boxleitner put it, one of the thinnest men he's ever seen in his life. Like, he has this big presence, this menacing, evil presence, but in reality, he's like 98 pounds soaking wet or something like that.
Yep.
So so he was on board too.
And of course, Jeff Bridges. It's funny. This is our second Jeff Bridges episode.
I know. It's this thing we just did King Kong, and I'm like, wait a minute now. And he played, and he talked about that too. That he had just come off the special effects from King Kong, and now he's doing another special effects movie. And he said he's not a big fan of the blue screen because he doesn't know as an actor, how much to turn it on. Like, am I overacting? Am I underacting? Am I just about right? Because they're telling you stare at that X on the wall or that ping pong ball and emote, because it's going to be this giant monster in post effects, and you don't know what you're looking at. So you're kind of like, not like the brilliant acting we do here on the show.
That's true. That's true.
No. And then don't forget Cindy Morgan, also a co-star of
Frank
Boxleitner and Bring Him Back Alive, but she's also the female lead in this particular movie.
Who plays Laurie and Yori. And we had Barnard Hughes, who I remember from Mr. Merlin, I think it was.
He was on St. Elsewhere here.
Yes.
I remember that. Mr. Merlin.
And now,
oh, wait, we're forgetting the other cast member. Rev?
No,
Rev?
do you mean
Ram? That's his name.
Who I know from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Who is he in that movie? Death?
No,
Oh, he's Billy the Kid. Yeah, and the thing is, we already did a Bill and Ted show, so go back and watch it. Tron is bringing together every single character we've talked about on this movie.
Let's just hope it brings in ratings. That's all.
We talked about time travel movies, and David Warner was in
Time After Time. There you go.
Okay, this Tron is a bigger picture than we thought. Okay, so go on. You got Steve Lisberger, who did commercials. He was famous for doing like local radio commercial here. They would show this like this godlike being, all very neon, and he would smash his hands together, and then the local station would say, "Now watch WPLR, home of rock and roll."
Listen. The best rock and the best year of your life. FM 104 KBEQ.
So they used that 30-second bit. That was his first claim to fame. He sold that across the country to like every local market, and they're like, "Wow, look at this great commercial we have." Little do they know it's the same one that's being shown in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and San Francisco. Then he gets hired. Now, here's a bad thing that happens. For the 1980 Olympics that are going to be on NBC. And he comes up with an idea called the Animal Olympics. And I remember watching these. They were these little vignettes that they were wrapping around the real Olympics, where they would show like penguins doing the high dive and, rhinoceroses running down on a track and field event. And all this was going to be great. So they got the go ahead. They did it for the winter ones. And then what happens? Russia invades Afghanistan. The United States pulls out of the Olympics, and there's no Olympics to show here in the States. So they made all these cartoons that
Yeah.
they were supposed to wrap around the Summer Olympics, but they didn't do anything with it. So now he's got nothing going on, but he's got this idea for a movie called Tron, and he's done storyboards and he's done some basic animation for it. And he goes to Disney with the idea he's going to make an animated film. It wasn't going to be live action.
Mhm.
Tron was always intended to be a big animated movie. So where do you go but to Disney, the home of animation? And once he gets there, that's where all the fun comes in, because they start doing tests with pure white backgrounds,
Mhm.
and they get the actors to wear like white spandex suits, almost like a scuba diving suit. And they filmed it in black and white, because now that they have this black and white image, they could, make a negative of it. They
Mhm.
could reverse it out. They could tint it red, purple, green, add some glows. So they did the test. They showed it around, and people are like, hey, let's do more of this movie. And now you got to come up with a story.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, the guy gets sucked into the video game. Oh, okay. Well, let's do that. And like you said, then they go get Jeff Bridges. He comes on board, and they film the opening sequence where he's a frustrated video game designer who's not getting the credit for all the video games he's invented, because the evil corporation run by David Warner, who plays Dillinger, is taking the credit for all his games. So here comes Flynn, who just sits above an arcade with a little room, and he wants to break into the evil corporation to get his name and get the evidence that he needs to show that he's the creator. But the evil MCP, which stands for Master Control Program,
Yes.
is watching, because it's actually sentient. It's actually come to life, and it wants to take over the world. It wants to take over the Kremlin, and
It was going to the Pentagon, all these sort of
yeah,
things.
it was
It's
very creepy,
It's the story's a little bit ahead of its time. Predates Cyberdyne
Morgan.
Systems and Terminator, and
Yeah.
Google and Apple and everything like that. So
Well, no, in a couple of years, War Games would start that movie.
that's
And
true.
that's
That
about
83, yeah.
back to Tron.
Interestingly, with those original tests, the Bruce Boxleitner had he had these spiky sort of cyberpunk sort of hair and everything like that,
Yeah.
and then they realized, well, we can't actually do matte lines against those. It's going to be really difficult to do. Or in this case, I got helmet hair after this.
Yeah.
But so that's why they've got helmets on, because it's easier to do the matte line around the hair.
Curve.
And also you were talking about the white backgrounds. They realized they needed so much light to light all those white backgrounds. They decided to switch that to black backgrounds. And their costumes were like this, white. And that way they could easily do the matte lines. So that was all for the live action. And then what they do, as you said, they did a color process. They colorized it. They shot a lot of it through like in the 70s, a lot of there was a lot of backlit
Rotoscope.
Rotoscoping, where they had light shining through it. I always loved the troopers in the world of Tron, where they'd have those big sticks, or they'd prod someone with, and you'd have that rainbow light sort of effect. There was some really good effects in there. But then, of course, they had to do, well, how do we do the computer animation? And they actually didn't use, there's only like 20 minutes only. I mean, back then that was humongous, but 20 minutes of, computer generated footage in there. And you couldn't do live action and CG at the same time. They couldn't do it. So they had to use a combination of, whenever you see an actor, for example, they're in the light bikes,
the light cycles,
it would be hand animated to make it look like they're driving their light bikes or what have you. The computer generated images, they actually couldn't generate them as a film. They had to do them as individual images, and some of those images would take 6 hours to render. So they'd have to do that. And of course, they my students, when they have a look at this, they go, oh, it's so, there's no texture, where's the atmospheric lighting,
there's no
like that? They didn't have any of that stuff back
so smooth. No, not at all. No. In fact, years later, you tell your students, John Lasseter, who of course comes out with Toy Story, says if it wasn't for Tron, there wouldn't be any Toy Story. There wouldn't be any of that technology, because as smooth as everything looks so perfect, it was because this is the first time they did that stuff. It's the light cycles, it's the tanks that are going around, it's those I call them like the overseer.
Are they recognizers? Is that what they're called?
Yeah. They look like an upside down U that flied around. Yeah, that type of stuff. All that, like you said, they'd cut away and they would film like Jeff Bridges inside a tank, and it was just a set where he'd move around, and then they'd cut to what's happening outside the tank and stuff. So they worked around it and all, but yeah, even the actors that were on set, because like you said, nobody knew what a home computer was. It's not something everybody had access to, and if you did, it was millions of dollars. You know, it was expensive. It's not something you're going to go buy down the street at Radio Shack. You know. And Cindy Morgan, who talked years later in an interview, I think it was for the 20th anniversary, said she had just bought a computer like the week before they filmed the documentary on the show. But nobody knew what they were doing. They were coming to the set, they were reading their lines, they were acting them out. And I think Boxleitner said it was very like improv, like you're on stage at a workshop, because you don't know what you're looking at, you don't know what's going on. The concepts are very out there for 1981, 82, with that time frame. No one knew what they were doing. So they finally sat down and said, listen, here's what's happening. You're inside a video game. And even that sounds crazy looking back at it now. But, they pulled it off. And like you said, there's some imagery that's in Tron that even if you didn't see the movie, like I didn't see it in the theaters, I saw it years later on VHS when that was a thing. They're just iconic. I mean, just the movie poster alone, where you have him holding the disc and he's standing up there like that they used on all the artwork and everything, that's in the movie.
That actually that reminded me a lot of Luke with his lightsaber and
Luke with the lightsaber. Yeah.
And I wondered if they tried to sort of, have some sort of association, in your subconscious.
Maybe because you're right. He does look like the poster from Star Wars 1977 when he's holding. You know what? You're right. You know what's funny? Here's the thing that dates itself. Now, when I had my first job out of college was working at a Highlight Fronton. Highlight was a handball type of game. It came from Spain, and they would have these elaborate baskets, or like they would catch it, and it was called a cessna, which meant basket in Spanish. And they would catch this ball. It was a little rock hard ball. I'm going to say it was pelota was the ball. I can't remember. And they would whip it against the wall, and it would go like 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. And the teams would go back and forth, and they would catch it. And if you're a big fan of like the 80s and you watch Miami Vice, you could see it in the opening credits of Miami Vice every episode. That's Highlight, because it was big down in Miami as well. And they were playing Highlight. Now, they use those in Tron when Bruce Boxleitner plays against this accountant, who's funny that's the actor who's going to be on Babylon 5 years later, Peter Jurassic, who played Malari, I think his name was, Ambassador Malari with the big
hair at the back.
Yeah. That's him. Years later, he put on some weight in that movie, but he's there now. And they have this futuristic video game handball thing where if you miss the ball, the ring that you're standing on gets smaller and smaller, and then you just fall off. But you know what was odd? And I don't know if you can explain this to me. Did he also get zapped out like Flynn did from the MCP? Did it digitize him too? Was he a real person out in the outside world?
No, he was an accountant. He
was an accountant. I was
he was an accounting program.
Oh, okay. Because I was like, was that a real guy that got sucked into the world of Tron and this was murdered right in front of us? So.
No, but you know what? I always laugh at when I watch this back when they're in the labs, the laser lab, which is a real laser lab in the white and everything. Where they do that. There's a great scene where they're walking through Cindy Morgan and Jeff Bridges, and there's these guys on a yellow scissor lift.
Yeah,
and it's just coming down as they're going. But there's nothing above.
Nothing happened.
I'm just going, why are they on this scissor lift? I know why, because it looks like there's some motion in the background. But are they fixing a light bulb? What's going on?
Maybe that they were just the maintenance guys there. Yeah. And the other thing too, when Flynn gets taken into the world of Tron, I'm always confused because I'm like, what happened to his physical body? Was it vaporized? I mean, that part, they never get into it. It's just movie magic. Don't think about it. But they
explain it. Barnard Hughes, who explains it a little bit.
Well, they did it with the apple. They showed how they took an apple and they zapped it into
or an orange. It's an orange.
An orange it was. Yeah.
So, But
I don't know.
again, interesting the effects, and you can sort of tell me. I didn't know it as a kid, and just watching it, going, "Oh, that's fantastic." But when he does go like that, and you notice it's just a lot of those are actually just still
It's
images.
just still
Images
frames. That's
of
all it is, and
of
they just
the
don't. Yeah,
yeah, and the same with the laser. You have a look, and all they do is they backlight on that
yeah,
photo like a matte
yeah,
painting, really,
yeah.
just
Little scratch. Yeah,
lights,
that's all it
and that's
is.
it. But so it's really clever. And I think that Sid Mead's designs as well, really help, with those iconic the light cycles, and
Yeah.
all those designs are
Well,
pretty timeless.
even the face, the way they lit the face, it kind of looked. It always reminded me of like a early turn of the century early motion picture.
Oh
When
yes,
they have the hand crank ones and
yes,
you see the lighting and it
yep,
flickered. They said the reason why that flickered is because when they were getting the film from Kodak, the actual film back in the day, not digital
yes,
stuff, they processed it and they would do it on rolls and rolls and rolls of film, reels of film.
yep,
And they would ship it to them and they would go in the back and they'd grab another reel and they'd go to, film the movie. And they couldn't understand, literally was keeping them up at nights, why the color would change in the middle of a scene because you're filming it, you switch to a different film stock, but like suddenly the color's like little red and then it fades away and then it goes back to red. And so they have this flickering and they're like, what's going on here? They were grabbing the film from Kodak so quickly that each film, when it was made, processed, it had its own emulsion on it. So it never matched perfectly. And it just showed up more. Like when you're doing an outdoor scene and you're in Star Wars, you probably don't notice it too much, even though I've seen it in Star Wars a little bit.
yep.
This was obvious. So that's when they came up with this electronic flicker. And you'll see that throughout Tron. Like when they're in a scene together, you'll see like they'll animate a little like flash of light.
Yes,
And it's almost like a flash bulb going off. And you'll see the actors don't even pay attention to it because they didn't know what was going on because they're
yes.
actually working. They don't realize the film stock is variable, changing. So they just made that part of the movie. So whenever you're watching Tron and you see the two actors talking and you'll see like a little yellow thing blip by and they light and change, they did that just to hide the fact that their skin tone was changing so
Ah,
much from reel to reel. So yeah, it's a little, again, they were finding this stuff out. And the reason how they found that out is because the director Steven woke up at 3 a.m. because he'd been doing this for a year and he couldn't stop thinking about
yes.
it. And his brain wouldn't shut off. And literally he woke up at 3 a.m., grabbed Harrison Ellenshaw. They went to the Disney studios, ran into the warehouse to find the film stock and looked at every box. And that's how they knew that there was something different with each film quality. I mean, that's being obsessive. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Bruce Boxleitner took the movie. Originally, he said no to it, and then it came at him again. He said he was so passionate, the director, Steven, he knew everything about this world. He would talk about it endlessly. He would just go on about all the nuances and stuff. And he said anybody that was committed to it, even though you didn't know what it was going to be, you knew it was going to be something special because this guy was so passionate about this final product of
Yes.
Tron when it came out. So I mean, it's up there. I mean, like you said, it's just ahead of its time for everybody that was involved too.
It was, and the critics really enjoyed it. For the most part, they thought it was look visually spectacular.
Yeah.
They enjoyed the story. However, that didn't translate to box office. It was not a.
No,
It
no.
it didn't flop. It made worldwide. I think it cost $15 million
Yeah, it
to
did. In
make.
15
It
minutes.
made
Yeah.
$50 million worldwide, but after their previous live action film, which
Yeah.
was The Black Hole, which again flopped as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So they didn't make a live. I don't
No,
think
and
they made a
they
live
said
action film for ages after that.
no, they talk about it. Disney was not a big movie company like it is nowadays. Back
Mm.
then, they were transitioning from their animation that they'd been known for and all that. Then when it came time to do this movie, they were just on uncharted territory because they weren't making the break to the big movies. People knew Disney as a family oriented movies, kind of hokey,
Yep.
kind of like the Cat from Outer Space, the Apple Dumpling Gang,
The
all these like
Computer wore
rated
tennis
G,
shoes.
yeah, all these rated G movies, the Herbie the Love Bug movie series, they were fine. You go see them and take the little kids. No one's going to get scared or anything like that. They were having a tough time making that jump into the big budget
Mm.
movies like Star Wars and ET and Close Encounters. They just couldn't figure it out, and they were hoping Tron was going to kick open the door and bring them into that world. But it would be years before they got their feet wet with the, Little Mermaid, and they started bringing back traditional animation. You know what? There was such a backlash against the CGI in this movie. Do you know it was excluded at the Academy Awards for special effects because they said they cheated by using the computer graphics? They wouldn't even, nominate the artists behind the movie that were making all the computer graphics.
It was crazy. They, I know. I know.
No, you look back now,
and today.
That's all you see at best visual effects for the Avengers Endgame, for what's the big one that James Cameron does? I can't remember, but it's the biggest movie. Avatar. No one sees Avatar, but yet it's the biggest movie. Don't ask me why.
It was nominated for costume design. And I think production design as well. But it was nominated for a number of Saturn Awards and other awards, but it just didn't take off.
Didn't click. Yeah.
The score by I think it was Wendy Carlos.
She did the Shining score. She did
the Shining and has worked with Stanley Kubrick. It was done on a Moog synthesizer, so it's got an interesting score. It
does have some similar Shining sounds. Sometimes that ominous sound. You're like, oh my God, that's the Shining. She did the other big. Not 2001. There was another Kubrick film. She only did 3 movies.
Yeah.
She did The Shining. She did Tron, and I can't think of the other Kubrick pictures she did, but that was it. She's done other stuff. She did albums and stuff, but as far as scoring movies,
yes,
those are the 3. It'll show up on the bottom. That's how we normally do.
I've put it up already. There you go.
Yeah, already. You're ahead of the game.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what was the other big thing. Home video games. We were talking about that. Now, I had an Atari 2600.
Yes.
There was a home version of Tron, but it was on the Mattel Intellivision system, which was a different home computer system altogether. You either had Atari or you had Intellivision. And I had Atari because that was the more popular one.
Yeah.
But there was a Tron game. I do remember.
Yes.
But I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
I was going to say the Tron arcade game was kick-ass. There was a real, cabinet version of the Tron game.
I remember that the joystick that was translucent blue and would light up. That was a huge hit, and that made more money than the film.
I know.
And then a year later, they brought out Discs of Tron, which was the game basically where you were shooting discs, a little bit like Breakout. That wasn't as successful. They did bring out a few toys. Tomy brought out a number of action figures.
There was there was the light cycles. I remember they had
as well, which had zip cords, so you could zip them around. They had also Tomy brought out a table one, and I remember going to Kmart. This would have been 1982, 83. They had it on display, and it was a translucent background, and you could see inside the tabletop game, and on the circuit board they had printed the world of Tron on there, and I'm going, how cool! You can actually see where Tron is, but I could never. That was too expensive. I could never afford it.
No.
And today it's worth too much now.
No, there wasn't a comic book though. Weirdly enough, there was always there was even a comic book about Condor Man, which is another Disney property. But there wasn't a Tron comic book. I don't know. They
did bring out. There's the novelization here.
I read that. You know what? I remember. Is Alan Dean Foster?
Yep.
That who wrote it?
No, Brian Daly.
Oh, from Han Solo trilogy. Usually, if you read a movie adaptation in the 80s or 70s, it was always Alan Dean Foster. But no, I read that one, and that's how I knew the movie. I didn't get to see the movie in the theaters, but I remember reading the adaptation of that. And there's photographs from the film.
And the only other thing I've got is the Tron pop-up book.
Oh, I don't remember that. Did that come out at the same time?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's quite cool. The there we go. There's them breaking through the wall with the light cycles. And
did they make the soundtrack? Was that available that summer, or was that?
I don't remember. I didn't get it.
No, I didn't get it either. But I'm thinking, they always have the soundtrack to all these movies, so it's probably one of those hard to get ones nowadays.
Yeah. And there you go. You can actually destroy the MCP. Here we go. I'll see if this works.
I wonder if there was any food tie-ins, like any Tron glasses. or yeah, well, there was no Happy Meal Tron toys. I don't think.
I don't
They
think,
didn't.
no, there wasn't. They did they had a few, weird sort of they had I think some tie-ins where you could, get posters through
Yeah.
cereal and things like that. Medicom or Kubrick's actually
Yeah.
they brought out maybe 10 years ago some Tron little figures. So I've got
Oh,
Sark
okay.
and the MCP and a light cycle. I've got that, but I couldn't find it, and unfortunately. And we should talk a bit about, being a cult film. There was this I suppose this people loved the film, so they were expecting a sequel. And we
Yeah.
often get you talk about Star Wars or all these properties that are beloved that do get sequels. So in 2010, Joseph Kosinski brought out Tron Legacy, which brought back Bruce Boxleitner, Jeff Bridges. It had Garrett Hedlund in it and Olivia Wilde, and a young CGI version of
Yeah.
Jeff Bridges,
Jeff
which
Bridges. Yeah.
looked amazing in the still shots.
That was but that was like the first time that de-aging technology was used that I knew.
It was a computer. In fact, they had an actor and they totally replaced his head. And
I was stunned because I saw that with my kids and they were young. They were like 10 and 12. They didn't know who Jeff Bridges was. Yeah. Maybe from Iron Man, but he didn't look the same. But I was like, oh my God, how did they do that? Because he looked like 1982 Jeff Bridges. And that was all new. And you're like, if they could do that, they could do it. But you got to remember, it was all done on a dark background. So it hit a lot of the movie
The only problem I found was he just had a little bit of the bobblehead.
Yeah, it wobbled a bit. Yeah.
And again, I don't know if it's because we know it's not him,
Yeah.
I think your kids who might not have known who Jeff Bridges
they didn't pick it up.
They probably go, oh well, he's wow, they got a young actor who looks like him.
Yeah.
So it did reasonably well. It was it was great. The score by
3D. It was crazy.
Oh yes,
gorgeous with all the special effects and the computer graphic stuff. The stuff was coming off the screen. It was
I
great.
bet the score by Daft Punk was fantastic.
Yep.
I do have a copy of that. That was really good. It did okay as well at the box office, but there was going to be another.
There was going to be part 3. They talked about that.
But it nothing happened. They did do an animated series called Tron Uprising. Which is between Tron and Tron Legacy.
Yeah.
And that had Bruce Boxleitner back as Tron doing the voice and things like that. And that was reasonably successful.
Yeah.
They brought out some action figure. I do have a Jeff Bridges, I think, action figure or a Tron action figure from Tron Legacy where they had actually, it was like a holographic face. You press the button and his face lights up and talks, which was
really? That's cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say you talk about Tron Uprising, the animated cartoon. It's on Disney Plus right now because I went and watched it in prep for the show. It's 19 episodes. They're about 20, 30 minutes long. It's pretty good. The thing of it is, I noticed, now correct me if I'm wrong, which we never are on this show, but I watched Tron last week on Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just like Star Wars and just like every other movie, they go and they tweak it, they clean it up. I've got to say, I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe you can fill me in if it's true. Did they go back and clean up Tron and add all new versions of the special effects? Because obviously I'm watching it on a 4K TV, so it's amazingly sharp now. But the colors and everything look too crisp for 1982 technology. Because if it was that clean back then, hats off to them. Because I remember when you go to a theater in the 80s, it depended on the projector bulb, the theater. Sometimes it was a little dark to see stuff, but this stuff is unbelievable, knowing the fact it was done 40 years ago practically. I mean, the effects are great. So I'm wondering if the one that's on Disney Plus is like a special edition, if they went in there and cleaned it up, because it wouldn't take them long nowadays. I mean, the Tron effect would probably be done in a half an hour on a laptop somewhere, you know?
You're probably right.
I don't know if you know.
I know that for the Blu-ray release, they did a little bit of cleanup. I don't think they did like with the Star Trek series where they have, brought in all new visual versions of the visual effects. But I do know we spoke about it earlier, the cubicle scene with the matte painting. I know
Yeah.
they fixed that up because in the original
Oh, they
version,
did.
it floats a little bit.
Oh, okay.
So they fixed that. So it wouldn't surprise me that they did,
Yeah. Yeah.
tweak it or grade it a little bit. It did look we last night we were going from 4K to we had streaming issues or whatever, but
Yeah.
when it was at 4K, it looked fantastic. The
Right?
even on the live action stuff looked
Yeah.
amazing. You're going, they filmed that in 1982.
I know. I know. I'll tell you one thing that always gets me a little frightened is that at the very end of the movie, spoiler alert, after they defeat the MCP, the helicopter that comes flying up and lands on the roof,
Yeah.
and the actors are there. I'm like, oh my God, I hope no one gets blown off the top of that building or something, because
A year later, think Twilight Zone.
oh my God, it shot up so fast and
Yeah.
just does a pivot and lands. And Jeff Bridges bounces out of that thing and just taps on the window. I'm sure they added it in post. He's like, come back in an hour. And then he just goes up to them. And there's really no end to that movie. And I told you before some of the weaknesses of it. It's just like, hey, look who's happy now. And then credits roll. I was like, that's your end. I mean, we assume everything ended happily ever after for him.
I think so. I think so. And
Watch Cindy Morgan's reaction when that helicopter
oh
lands.
yeah,
He's not
he
acting.
almost
She
gets
looks
blown
terrified.
away by that.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I'm watching this movie. I go, oh my God, did she almost get blown off the roof? Because she literally looks terrified for a minute. And Boxleitner's kind of like, hey, just keep in character. And I've met Cindy Morgan a lot because she's also on the convention circuit around here. I've never had her at my show. But if next time I see her, I got to ask her, like, did you almost get blown off that building? Because it looked it. And a lot of people know Cindy Morgan, too, from Caddyshack. That's her other big 80s film with Chevy Chase and Bill Murray and Rodney Dangerfield, too. But very beautiful actress when she's young. She's still amazingly attractive now, 40 years later. Not that I'm hitting on her, but I'm just saying when you see that movie, you go, wow, that's Cindy Morgan. She was all that.
Yeah.
And so is Olivia Wilde in Tron Legacy.
Yeah,
one of the
true.
reasons why I watched that movie is love.
But you know what you could do? Well, next year is the 40th anniversary of Tron. It might be good to get Bruce and Cindy together.
Not a bad idea. You hear it right here. Terrificon 2022.
Yeah.
Tron lives.
But I sort of like the ending in that, and then it showed obviously, it was the time lapse of the city, and you have a look at that and how that looks like the circuits of a computer, and you just realize that they're not so different. So I sort of
I told you before we started filming, there's a great video. Not that anybody wants to watch any other thing on YouTube, but do a YouTube search for Tron versus Tron Legacy, and they do a side-by-side comparison of both films for about 8 minutes or so in the clips. No sound, just the imagery. There's so much repetitive imagery in Tron Legacy from the original Tron. I was surprised. I didn't realize how much there was, but when you see it side by side, you go, oh wow, I guess it's an homage to the first movie.
I think so. But if you do that, you have those parallels and you go, well, I think the people who watch Tron will go, that's reminiscent, or that's got the same feeling.
I get
it's
that.
Like in
Force Awakens, Star Wars. We watched that movie. They go, oh, that's
Justice League, Man of Steel,
there's
Batman versus Superman. They have a lot of those, callbacks or throwbacks to those scenes. So I think that's a good thing, and it shows how the people involved in the sequel really, had a deep love of the original.
Oh yeah, the original. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a great ride at is it Disneyland
Tokyo?
No, it's not at Tokyo. I don't think it's at Tokyo. Is it maybe at Shanghai Disneyland where they've got the Tron light cycles?
Yeah, that's coming here to the States. That's when I was at Disney World last year before COVID. When you go to Epcot, they had it under construction. There was big signs. They were bringing it into the Epcot Center. I can't remember what it's. Oh, it's replacing the one.
Was that the General Motors one, or was it?
Where you go back in time and see the dinosaurs that turn into oil and stuff.
Oh, is it that one? I thought it was the car one they were replacing.
Oh, Test Track? No, no, Test Track's still there. I thought it was replacing the travel through time.
I'll put it down right here now. I'll put it.
Yeah, okay, but no, it had the big signs like coming next year.
Yeah,
Tron, and it had the big light cycle. So I guess you get to sit down on it and just ride. Is it a roller coaster or?
Well, it's sort of a raw. It's a combination. It looks fantastic, and the reports are the one that's overseas. Well, I suppose yours is overseas to me as well. But it's pretty fantastic, and of course, there's always been those talk of Tron 3. They've spoken about Joseph Kaczynski said it's not dead or this, and then I recently saw that Jared Leto was attached to it.
Okay.
So who knows?
Like I said, there was a Tron comic book that came out a couple years ago that tied into Tron Legacy. So there's that you could do. And I just told you, I think about a year ago when I went to the stores, for some reason, Walgreens, which is a chain of pharmacies, they came out with a whole line of Walt Disney properties. And I've got the
Black
Rocketeer
Hole.
over here.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
This is my Rocketeer. But they also have a Tron.
Yep.
So you can get the Bruce Boxleitner one there. And they had the Black Hole. Was another one they came out with. Yeah. So, and Nightmare Before Christmas. That's the thing. So we're plugging the Walgreens exclusive.
And oh my gosh, hang on a second.
Oh, and Hallmark, who we always talk about Hallmark ornaments. Hallmark made a Tron ornament. I don't know if you have it there. Do you?
No, but I've got this.
Oh, the
How
Funko.
can I forget?
Yeah. Everybody's got a Funko. No, the only people that don't have Funko are MASH, which I can't believe they don't do that now. I was thinking of the other day because we've covered MASH too. Every episode, every show we've done, $6 Million Man, no Funko. MASH, no Funko. Land of the Lost, Funko. Go figure,
Yeah. But this one, I don't know if I can do. I'm just trying to get him to. He actually. Oh, you can't really.
Glows?
He glows in the dark. This one.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Look at that.
I forgot. So I do.
Before we sign off, I just want to let people know, if you watch this whole thing, could you tell us the origins of your pseudo Tron helmet that you have on?
So I was saying this. So in Australia, we had back in the 80s, we had these things called stack hats. So it's mandatory to wear a helmet when you're riding a bike in Australia for
drop bears. Yeah, you gotta watch out.
So
drop bears.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, these are and so I had this one, but it was daggy as a kid, because everyone else had really cool helmets, and I just remember as a 16-year-old going, and that was in '86, so not too long after Tron, going, this looks like a Tron helmet. I reckon at some point in my life, I'm going to turn this into a Tron helmet, and
then 1986, 30-something years later, 36 years later.
Yep.
It came.
I'm doing it. It's worthwhile with a bit of gaffer tape and
the magic.
And here I am in the world of Tron.
Oh, I just want to mention there's one outtake before we sign off.
Yeah.
In Tron, the big scene where he's having a fight with the discs.
Yes.
The director was riding Bruce Boxleitner for a good week or so. Like, are you getting in shape? Are you practicing? Are you taking this seriously? Because we're going to film the big disc throwing.
Yes.
Let's see what you can do. And Boxleitner's, I'll be ready. Don't worry about it. But he was really riding him, So Steven gets up on a ladder, or maybe it was that crane that you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
He's way up there, and he gets the Frisbee or the disc, and he whips it at Bruce Boxleitner's head. And it's coming straight for him, and Boxleitner grabs it over his head and does one of these looks. And that's the scene that's in the movie. They filmed it, and all the cameramen were applauding because he's not acting. He's really ticked at that moment because he almost got hit in the head with the disc, and he just gives the director a look right there, like, I'm going to kill you when I'm done with this. So when you watch that movie and you see it, that's real. That's not acting. That's real anger going on for Tron. So
that's right. Well, you can actually find I think on Disney Plus as well, they've got the Prop Culture series. Only one season of it, but they do cover Tron, and they get I'm sure it's Bruce Boxleitner who they get to have a look at his original costume and the Tron disc, which is really just a Frisbee.
That's all it is a Frisbee. Yeah. And the funnier thing is, I remember Jeff Bridges said they had to wear a dancer's belt underneath their costume, which is kind of like a elaborate jock strap that keeps all your personal things in there. And there was not a lot of sitting down on the set because it was very binding. Let's just say that. So when you see all the actors and their skin
I assume
tight,
that's why his costume had a little toga.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's exactly right, because it was so tight. you couldn't move, and it was, pulling down on your genitals. So he's like, you're killing me, guys. So he has a little towel that kind of loosened his belt a bit.
Yeah.
So we didn't see too much of Tron's his naughty bits there. But anyway, we digress.
What a way to end the episode. So
talking about Jeff Bridges' nuts.
Okay. Tron. Tron, well worth a watch. It's only 90 minutes. It's a bit slow going, but you've got to remember that's the style of the film, back then. And again, the visual effects, while today's standards are pretty ho-hum, are pretty amazing for the time. And it's hard not to get a bit of a thrill watching those wonderful, the light cycles, and especially for people of our generation or later who played not on their Nokia phones, the Snake game. I'm sure they
you go around it. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And then there was the tank battle game, which I always liked, which is in the movie too.
Yeah,
you know what? I'm wondering if they I have a replica. I wonder if they made one of Tron out there. I'm supposing that would sell. You never know.
No, but I'd probably buy that one. I reckon that's pretty.
Yeah, it's of all the PlayStation games we have here and the Xbox, I wonder if you can get an updated Tron. Maybe for Tron Legacy, they came out with a video game.
There was a video game that they did bring, a computer game, a PC game, Tron, I think it was 2.0. And actually the original composer did she did the score for that as well.
Oh, okay.
Elements of it. So that apparently was quite good. So you can probably, if you've got an older PC, find that. So there's lots, but obviously it's not as
it's not as popular as a lot of 1982. It's no ET, it's no Star Trek 2. Like I said, it's of its time. It was one hell of a year. We could do a whole series of shows just on this 1982 movies. Because
I know we're peaking, like Tron. We're peaking a little bit early by looking at Tron before its 40th anniversary.
Wait till we do the Blade Runner one. Oh wait, that's
hang on. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's all right.
Which they just came out with Blade Runner Funko Pops last week.
Oh, they did.
I have them. Rick Deckard and Roy Batty. I didn't get the.
I'm thinking of the 2049 ones. I know they had.
No, those were out, but now they did ones for the original movie.
Okay.
And the chase figure is Roy Batty with the just the black briefs on, holding the bird from the end.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Anyway, we digress. Let's wrap it up, Ed. We got to go play some video games.
That's right. And I've got to try and get this off my head. So, if you want to subscribe, how can you do that, Mitch?
Ed, it's as simple as jumping on a light cycle. Just hit the subscribe button right below, and you'll know next time we go on an excellent adventure.
Yes, you don't want to jump on that light cycle a little bit too hard.
Gotta be careful. You don't want to hurt
things happening.
Anyway,
go watch Tron. It's great fun, and Tron Legacy as well. It's really good. It makes for a good double feature. Thanks for watching, by the way. This is Ed Dollister.
This is Mitch Halleck.
And we will see you in the world of Tron and somewhere else next episode. Thanks a lot. Take care.